On today's show, we'll be covering demons, angels, gods, and much more. All coming up on this episode of Paranormal Mysteries. Thank you for joining me, and welcome to another week of Paranormal Mysteries. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. I hope you all had a great weekend, and before we start today's episode, I'd like to thank Anoob at Best and Maria for their support and generosity. And if you enjoy the show, please consider following, sharing, and reviewing the podcast. This supports us by helping new listeners to discover the show. You can also support us at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries or at buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. And if you'd like to share your paranormal encounter on the podcast, you can submit your story through email at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com, through voice message at speakpipe.com/paranormalmysteries, or on our website at paranormalmysteriespodcast.com. And all of these links can be found in the show notes. And with all that in mind, our first listener story comes to us from Suzanne. And Suzanne's story is called Old Gods. Suzanne says, "Dear Nick, first I would like to thank you for your wonderful podcast. I live in Vienna, Europe. I am writing you because I want to add a different perspective to the truth that is beyond reality as we know it. Of course, contact with the supernatural can be frightening, and there might be a lot of strange presences out there, but if you try to look at it openly and with some sort of a childlike curiosity, some of the phenomena may lose their scarcity, leaving you with gratitude and astonishment or even amusement. When I was a child, it felt absolutely normal for me to ask an unborn child whether it would be a girl or a boy. I just had to focus on the question and the answer came to my mind. I liked this game, and I never wondered why the answer was correct. And since death seemed to be a natural part of life, I was not horrified when I once received the answer that the unborn child would not survive. Of course, I felt sorry for the mother, but I also got the clear impression that it was okay. And so it was all the easier for me to accept this information. Growing up, I lost that natural way of just accepting things, and so I've had some experiences that really freaked me out, like the unsettling feeling of knowing that a person was about to die, or to see a serious illness in a person, even without asking for that information, and to find out that the premonition came true within days. The ability to know in advance of death or serious illness bothered me very much before it helped save my daughter's life. Since then, I am very grateful, and if you are interested, I could tell you more about that. These days, I'm in my 40s and at peace with most of the mysterious things that linger out there. I'm a psychologist, and so I know that there is nothing like truth or reality. And as I get a bit deeper into the field of parapsychology, I know that you can get information in ways that science can't explain. But as I said, I don't want to go too much into details. I have accepted that there are ways to receive information that we cannot yet understand. But did people in the Stone Age understand how electricity works, or a phone? It would have freaked them out, don't you think so? However, what I want to tell you today is an encounter with, well, let's call it the manifestation of an archetype, or maybe call it an old god. I hesitated long, but finally I made the decision to share this story with you, and maybe with your listeners, if you decide to share it on your podcast. It is very important for me to be respectful with the supernatural, so I share this story in the hope that it inspires you and helps you and some people out there to look out for the brighter side of the supernatural. Here is my story. I was in my early 30s when my now ex-boyfriend, my daughter, and I went on vacation to a Greek island. When it was time to return home, we took a ferry to the mainland. Unfortunately, we didn't have 3 seats in a row, which was strange because we had booked seats next to each other. Instead, I was assigned a seat next to a middle-aged Greek guy. Before long, he turned to me and asked me where I was from, and we started a conversation about traveling, hospitality, and so on. He was a charming and pretty handsome guy, and I was a bit concerned that my boyfriend might be jealous, which he often was. So I decided to bond the two later so he could see that this guy was not a rival. Anyway, after a while of chatting, my seatmate looked at me in the eye and asked very seriously, "Are you interested in Greek mythology?" I told him I loved these ancient stories about heroes, goddesses, and gods, and their adventures and affairs. He then told me to listen very carefully. He said, "It seems that Greece is a Christian country, but believe me, the old gods are still here and alive, and they are still powerful." As he went on, he said that because I was a traveler, it was really important to thank the old Greek gods of travelers for the hospitality and to promise that I would come back to Greece one day. Otherwise, I might have troubles to find my way home, because this god was a joker, and he liked to play pranks on travelers who were ungrateful to him. I laughed and promised to do so, without taking him seriously. Shortly afterwards, we arrived at the port. All passengers got off the small speedboat and initially stopped in front of the boat to wait for the further transfer. The wooden pier was very long, and our boat was at the far end, and there were no other boats there. I saw my boyfriend and my daughter and waved to them, as I wanted to introduce them to my travel acquaintance, who had got off the boat right behind me. When I turned around, however, my travel companion could not be seen. I was confused. Perhaps he had gone back to the boat again. The doors were just closing, and the boat was empty, except for all of the crew members. I then searched the bank, but he couldn't be seen there either. And in the short time since we got out, it would have been impossible to reach it, even if he had ran. The guy had just disappeared. I was speechless and asked my boyfriend if he might have seen the man who sat next to me, but he hadn't seen him either. What surprised me even more was that he hadn't even noticed that I was sitting next to a stranger. With his almost pathological jealousy, that was nearly unthinkable. Should I have been dreaming? But no, I had definitely been wide awake. The proof was a slip of paper with an email address that the stranger had handed me. I put it in my pocket and made up my mind to contact him later to find out what had happened. We left the pier in puzzlement. I kept looking around. My travel companion was nowhere to be found. Finally, we picked up a rental car and drove towards the airport. We were running out of time, and I was afraid we'd miss the plane. Unfortunately, the sat-nav failed, and eventually we no longer knew where we were. We had lost our way and ended up in some suburb of Athens. If we didn't find the right way as quickly as possible, then we'd be in trouble. It was then that I remembered my conversation with my Greek travel companion. I thought to myself, if it doesn't help, it won't do any harm. And then I said loudly and desperately, "Dear old god of travelers, I don't know if you exist and if you can hear me, but I want to thank you for your hospitality, and I promise I will come back to Greece one day. But please, show us the way to the airport. We urgently need to go there," and head home again. My boyfriend and daughter just looked at me blankly, and at that moment we drove under a railway bridge, and behind the bridge we discovered an old crooked road sign. The handwritten letters were weathered, but we could read it clearly. It said, "To the airport." We all three cheered and profusely thanked the Greek god of travelers, and then we drove through the winding streets and found countless of the weathered old signs. It felt like somebody had put them there exclusively for us. We made it to the airport at the very last minute. The old god of travelers must have had great fun with us. I often think of this experience, and to this day I wonder whether it was all just coincidence, or should I really have met a being that wanted to call itself back to people's memories. By the way, I didn't contact my travel companion after all. The note with his email address was gone when I came home. Maybe I had lost it, or has it disappeared just like the man who gave it to me? I hope you enjoyed my story. Take care of yourself, and to all of your listeners, do not forget to be respectful with one another and with the beings of the other worlds. All the best, Suzanne. Our next story of the night comes to us from Maciel, and Maciel's story is called Feeling Death. Maciel says, "Hi Nick, I hope all is well. I guess I never really wanted to accept that I could see things growing up, because that way if I didn't have to acknowledge them, they weren't real. Listening to your podcast has helped me to accept the things that I've seen, and that I'm not alone. I'm writing to you because I wanted to share a recent experience that I had. About a month ago, I started having severe anxiety, full-blown panic attacks. I would just feel like I couldn't breathe, and I needed to take my clothes off and run outside for fresh air. This happened for at least 2 weeks, and then one night when I was trying to fall asleep, I felt something jump on my chest, and I heard loud whispers from various voices. I couldn't move. The only thing I could do was cry. The only reason that my husband realized something was wrong was because he was watching TV when whatever this was jumped on me, and I managed to grab his arm. My husband kept asking me if I was okay, but I couldn't speak. I could only cry. It felt like it lasted forever, but it was only seconds until I was let go, and I could move again. I tried to explain to my husband what had happened, but he thought I was just having another panic attack. From this night on, the same thing kept happening, but kept getting worse. Every night I would feel the walls closing in on me, or the mattress swallowing me, and then a loud whispering and the thing climbing on my chest or back. I wasn't able to sleep for weeks until one night when I was finally able to fall asleep without any incidents. I woke up around 2 a.m. facing my husband and realizing that nothing had happened, and I remember asking myself if it was finally over. But then I turned to face my window, and there it was. It was a small demon-looking creature in the corner next to my window, just staring at me with a big smile. It didn't move at all, it just stared at me. The only thing I could do was cry, roll over facing my husband, and beg him to hold me. The next night the same thing happened, only this time there was a second creature in the hallway, just standing there waiting. The third night, a third creature showed up. He was the tallest of the three, and he would stand at the foot of my bed and just stare at my husband and me. After the third one showed up, I started feeling the walls closing in on me, and the loud whispers. I honestly thought I was going mental, because now, even with the TV on and my husband awake, I could still see them. One night they just didn't show up, and again I thought maybe this was the end of it. But then I dreamt that they were chasing me, and when they caught me, 2 of them held me down while the biggest one ripped out my teeth. At the end of my dream, he handed me my teeth and said, "Now we're done." When I woke up, I automatically said to my husband that we needed to be prepared, because someone was going to die. 2 days later, I received word that my grandmother had passed. I haven't seen or felt anything since, and my husband has made it clear that I now make him nervous. I recently came back from attending my grandmother's services in Mexico, and my house feels really quiet. Thank you for reading my story, and thank you once again for providing us a place where we can share our encounters. Our next story of the night comes to us from Kay, and Kay's story is called Glowman. Kay says, "Hi Nick, I love the podcast and everything that's paranormal. So I've had many paranormal experiences since I was a child, but this one has been bothering me for months. I have no idea what this was, so I hope after I share my experience, you or someone will know what I saw. I had just moved to upstate New York from the West Coast to be closer to all my family and to live a slower-paced life. I usually go to my cousin's about once a week to hang out with him and his girlfriend. I normally stay the night on his couch because we'll drink and I don't want to drink and drive. He works early, so I will leave shortly after I hear him leave for work. He always told me to wait until it's light out because the deer are out, and he's worried that I'll hit one, damage my car, or have an accident or something. This one morning I decided to leave at the same time as him because I just wanted to go home and sleep in my own bed. It was still dark out and around 6:30 a.m., and he left 5 minutes before me. It's about a 20-minute drive home, and about halfway home I realize a really big figure standing on the side of the road. At first I thought that it was maybe a Bigfoot cutout, because I do see them on the way there, but I could tell that it wasn't flat. Then I thought that maybe it was someone trying to get a ride. It started to walk closer to the end of the corner, and by the time I got next to it, it was on the corner on my passenger side. It was about 7 or maybe 8 feet tall. I'm not sure. All I know that it was huge and all black, even the face. It was like a shadow person, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. As I was pulling up, it turned its head and body, and we locked eyes. I saw that it had really big, glowing red eyes, and shoulder-length hair that was also glowing, but light blue. The best I can describe it is that it looked like it had dreads, but they weren't dreads. I was so freaked out I didn't want to turn my head and look at it, so I kept driving, and for some reason I felt like I had to say out loud, "You cannot follow me home or hear my thoughts, and you have to leave me alone." I prayed to God that I would get home safe without any car problems. I don't have service after about 5 minutes on the way to his house, so I was terrified that if something happened, no one would know. I couldn't wait to get home and ask my cousin if he had seen it too. He said he had no idea what I was talking about, and he never saw it. I was in shock because I don't know how he didn't see it. It was huge and glowing. I've never seen it since or known anyone who knows what I'm talking about. I can still see it clearly in my head, and it scares me. If anyone knows, Please tell me. Thanks again. K. Our next story of the night comes to us from Pillar, and Pillar's story is called Workplace Apparition. Pillar says, "Hi Nick, I hope you're well and staying safe. I have a couple of stories for you, but in this email I'll start with the what the heck was that ghost story. In the 90s, I had been working for about 6 months in a well-known and well-established advertising agency in Puerto Rico. I was around 30 years old and was working as an assistant designer for one of the creatives at the agency, and I knew almost everyone there. One of my duties was to carry errands up and down the building. I had to go to the first floor to the copy machine's room, which had no door. In that area, if you stepped out of the copy room and turned to the right, you'd find a glass door and glass wall that was the entrance to the artist's workroom. I entered the copy room and started making copies close to the entrance, when I first felt and then saw someone passing through the entrance from left to right, pushing a mail cart. That's a common feeling when you're in an office building with many people. But things turned really weird. I saw an older, darker man with a blue guayabera shirt that is a traditional dress shirt that older men use in the Caribbean that is of a particular design. As I said, he was pushing a mail cart, but the thing is, I felt his tiredness as he pushed the mail cart, and suddenly the name Don Jose popped into my head. As what I can only describe as an instant, all those feelings came upon me, and recognizing them, I immediately stepped out of the room to have a double take and make sure that the man was okay. The glass door that I mentioned was a good 30 feet away from the room opening, and the door is kept closed. When I got out of the copy room, you guessed it, there was no one there. I stood confused, but aware that he had to have walked a distance to get to the door, and if he had gotten to the door, he would have had to have opened the door and pushed the cart through. What the heck was that? I asked myself with excitement and fright, all at the same time. I then picked up my copies and went straight to my boss's office to tell him what had happened. He was in the office of the copy editor, and they both just listened to my story and description in awe. They then smiled and nodded, but when I mentioned the name Don Jose, their smiles went away, and their eyes opened. Then one of them said, "So, I see you met Don Jose." "What?" I replied. Don Jose was the mail person that had been working there for more than 30 years. He was a very nice and humble man, happy to be delivering mail. He died of natural causes, but apparently loved his job so much that he stayed overtime. I apologize for the long story, but I wanted to give you every little detail as it was my first experience with a ghost, and I felt that it was pretty awesome. Thank you for your wonderful stories, and for having a place to share them. Our next story of the night comes to us from OJ, and OJ's story is called The Ghost in the Window. OJ says, "I've had a few weird things happen to me throughout my life, but this is one of the strangest. I believe I was about 10 at the time, and my mom had left me alone for a bit to go to the grocery store. She didn't have a car, so she walked there since it was just a few blocks away. While she was gone, I was bored, so I listened to my Bluetooth headphones and watched TV in the living room. I was so zoned out that I didn't realize how much time had passed until my mom came through the door. She asked me why I didn't wave back at her, and I was confused and didn't know what she was talking about. She said that she was walking up to our house when she saw me in the dining room window and waved, but I didn't wave back. I then told her that I hadn't left the living room the whole time she was gone. She sort of laughed it off, but she said she definitely saw someone in the window, and that it was probably a ghost. It was creepy being unaware of someone or something being in the next room while I was alone." Our next story also comes from OJ, and this story is called My Grandma's Ghost. OJ says, "I submitted another story, but this is the other weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. I was about 13 or 14 at the time, and I was hanging out with a friend who is now my boyfriend. We'll call him A. We were sitting in the living room watching TV, and he looks at my bedroom door, which was open and right next to the living room, and he asks, 'Do you see that?' I didn't see anything, so I said, 'No, what do you mean?' He said that he saw a short old man with short gray hair standing in my bedroom doorway, staring at him. I thought it was weird since I do believe in ghosts and have had weird things happen in that house, but I didn't know who he could have been talking about, so I brushed it off. Later I told my mom about it, and she looked surprised and said that my friend had described Grandma. She was short and had short gray hair, and people would often mistake her for an old man. My grandma died right after I was born, so I never got to meet her, but my mom kept her ashes in a wooden chest in her room. Also, my friend never saw any pictures of her or really knew about her. I still wonder to this day why she showed herself to him. Thank you for reading my story, and I love the show. Our next story of the night comes to us from Angie, and Angie's story is called Unexplained Bright Orb. Angie says, "A few years ago my husband was feeling ill and his blood pressure was elevated, so he laid down. I sat on the other side of the bed while he shut his eyes to rest, with my cell phone beside me. We have blackout curtains because my husband can't stand any light when he sleeps. The lamp beside him was off, and the room was dim. I was sitting straight up beside him, with my thoughts wandering and intermittently making a prayer for him to feel better. Suddenly I could see a bright light to my right, the side my husband was laying on. I turned to look directly at it, thinking that my husband must have turned on the lamp beside him. But no, he was motionless, just laying on his side, and the lamp was off. A small, extremely bright orb was hovering at the side of the bed, parallel to my husband. The light illuminated around his whole body, as if something was shining directly down on him, yet the orb was low and to his side. Even on the other side of his body beside me was bright, where logically should have been a shadow from a light at that angle. My brain, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, was trying to determine what the light source was. Was it the light on my cell phone? I must have turned it on accidentally, and it's reflecting off of something. But looking down, I saw that my phone was completely dark. I sat puzzled and now frozen as the realization crept over me that this orb wasn't from a natural light source, and it wasn't a reflection. And as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. My mind was racing. What was that? I called my husband's name and said, "Did you turn on a light?" Obviously he hadn't because he hadn't moved, but I needed some explanation. "No, I thought you just turned on a light. I've just been laying here half asleep," he said. With his eyes closed, he could tell that there was a light shining. I told him what I saw, and I rushed around the bed, certain that I would find the source of this orb, not wanting to fully accept this odd experience. I looked all around the bed, under the bed, in the bed beside my husband, but there was nothing. No reflections coming from anywhere, and I couldn't reason it away. "Go get my blood pressure cuff," he said. His blood pressure was now normal, and he felt fine. To this day, I can't explain away the orb I saw. A few people I told about the experience suggested that it was an angel or some heavenly manifestation. Whatever it was, my husband has been fine ever since. As we bring tonight's episode to an end, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, and a special thank you goes out to Suzanne, Maciel, Kay, Pillar, OJ, and Angie for sharing their experiences. And if you've witnessed something paranormal, I'd like to hear your story. You can share your experience with me through email, voice message, or on our website, and all of these links can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a great beginning to your week, and I look forward to seeing you back here on Wednesday as we continue our journey into the unexplained, right here on Paranormal Mysteries.